Welcome to the Federal Retirement Podcast. My name is David Rates from Benchmark Financial Group, and every month we discuss important topics regarding the retirement planning process for federal employees. This Lunch and Learn series is an interactive discussion where individuals can ask questions. To join these discussions live, you may register by joining our email list at bfgkc.com. We also provide in-person retirement planning and benefit education to federal employees. To learn more about these seminars or to schedule a seminar at your federal agency, go to our website at bfgkc.com and click on seminars. Additionally, if you're looking for assistance to get your retirement on the right track, set up an appointment with us today. You can schedule an appointment online by visiting our website at bfgkc.com or email me at david.rates@bfgkc.com. The contact information is also listed in the description. By setting up a complimentary consultation, we can review your financial situation and develop a plan to meet your financial goals. We hope you enjoyed this topic and hope to connect with you soon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Rates, founder of Benchmark Financial. Today, we are talking about timing, especially with your retirement decisions. The transition from employment to retirement involves a lot of planning, identifying the forms that need to be submitted accurately, as well as the timelines involved with submitting these completed forms. Because there are so many details to consider, timing is crucial when it comes to the retirement process. Planning well in advance can smooth the transition and help ensure that retirement benefits begin in a timely manner. Ideally, you should start thinking about retirement at least a year or two before your intended retirement date. This allows ample time to gather necessary information, consult with retirement advisors, and accurately complete your required paperwork. So, with that being said, I'm going to introduce you to David Rates, president of Benchmark Financial Group, to elaborate more on the timing of your retirement. David?
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. For this month's call, we thought it'd be a good idea to just touch on some of the key milestones in the retirement process, or take a look at how do you go from being an active employee to OPM retiree, and what are the pertinent pieces of information to know, and the timing of how benefits start to roll in for you as a retiree. So feel free to chime in with any questions that come to mind. So moving on. So when you're getting the process started, it's a really good idea to get a handle on the cards that you're working with. So any type of retirement estimate that you can get from HR or the GRB platform or Employee Express is an important piece of information to have, because you want to have a fairly good idea of what that your first pension amount is going to be. And if you're in a spot where a surviving spouse benefit is going to be a piece of your plan, you want to know what those surviving spouse benefit options are, what the cost is, and what those benefits are for that surviving spouse. So an estimate is an important piece of information to have when you're kicking around the idea of when to retire. And in addition to pension, you spend all this time saving the TSP money, but eventually you want to think about, okay, well, I've been saving. How do I distribute this money, and how do I do it in a way where I don't have to worry about running out of money at the wrong time? That's always an important variable to take into consideration. And you also want to stay up to date with investment options. The market's a variable thing, so it's not always best to set it and forget it. Sometimes it's advantageous to be invested in certain spots based off timing of what's going on, and other spots based off of other variables. So knowing the cards that you're working with TSP money is an important piece of the pie as well. And then getting a handle on distribution options. So in addition to pension, TSP, if you're in a spot where you're eligible for the first supplemental payment, you definitely want to know what that amount is. And you want to know how that ties into Social Security as well, because one of the things that's interesting about the first supplement is, for most folks, usually age 62 Social Security benefits are a couple $100 a month more than the first supplemental payment. So knowing what's coming down the pipe with that piece of things is always important. And oftentimes people spend a decent chunk of time trying to decide when to turn Social Security on. So that's usually a question of, do I turn it on when I'm first eligible at 62? Do I wait till full retirement age, or do I wait to age 70? You also want to check your eligibility. So one of the things that's easy to overlook is there's a difference between your service computation date for leave versus your service computation date for retirement. Service computation date for leave is kind of like a catch-all for any sort of service that total service that you had with the federal government. But service computation date for retirement is the time that they're actually using to calculate your pension payment, which is the important variable there. So if there's a discrepancy between the two, you want to know why. And if it's a surprise to you, you might want to get that ironed out earlier as opposed to later going down the road of retirement, so to speak. So, and then documentation on any sort of breaks in service, or if you've got time that you've made a deposit for, usually military time is a big one. You want to have a copy of that receipt and a copy of your DD 214. Redeposit time is kind of a rare one. FICA time, if you're in a spot where you can make a deposit for FICA time, it's definitely a good idea to inquire about that and know what your options are. Check your eligibility. So this is just a snapshot of a few different types of FERS estimates. So when you're communicating with HR about getting an estimate, there's some key things that you want to keep an eye on when they get it back to you. So you definitely, like we said a second ago, you want to verify your service computation date for retirement is the correct date, because if it's off by a few years, it can have a noticeable impact on what your actual pension payment is going to be. You want to check the high three salary estimate that was used in that estimate, because sometimes they don't necessarily make a forward projection on what your high three is going to be at a retirement date in the future. So if they're using your current salary for a retirement date that's like a couple of years down the road, that'll impact the actual payment amount that you're going to see with the pension piece of things. And then a lot of times people are kicking around, what's the best time to retire? A lot of folks tend to gravitate towards the end of December. One of the reasons for that is, for whatever reason, the leave year usually ends the first week in January. So hypothetically, if you retired 12/31/2024 and you're one of the people that carries over a lot of annual leave time, that leave payment gets paid to you in the following tax year. So if your retirement date, like I said, was 12/31/2024, your leave payment would get paid to you and be taxable income in the 2025 tax year. But a lot of times people are looking at mid-year retirement. So sometimes they'll have a few different timeframes run for retirement estimates, just to get an idea of how the numbers are going to get impacted by different retirement dates. And then you want to verify FERS surviving spouse benefits, whether or not they illustrated the maximum or the partial. So if you're in that zone where a surviving spouse benefit is a piece of your overall plan. All right. So submitting your FERS retirement forms to HR, that process, usually the general guide is about 90 days out. Sometimes you don't want to do it too early, because there have been situations where HR hasn't gotten to, or kind of put your file on a stack on a desk and not necessarily gotten to it by the time your formal retirement date rolls around. So you definitely want to know, and it usually helps to communicate with HR about how far out they want that paperwork. So definitely one of the check boxes to check off the list there. It's important to know the OPM backlog. So going back to that idea of end of the year retirement, there are a lot of pros to retiring 12/31, but at the same time, you always try to remind folks that there's a lot of people that gravitate towards that retirement date. So oftentimes there's a bottleneck of folks all going out at the same time if you're targeting end of the year retirement. And if you know what's coming down the pipe and you know that there's that bottleneck, it's something you can plan for, so you aren't surprised and kind of floating in limbo land trying to wonder when they're going to actually get to your final pension payment amount as opposed to interim pay. So the timing of when you formally retire definitely ties into how long OPM would hypothetically take to process your paperwork. And generally, the earlier you submit it, the less chance there is of a delay. But again, verifying with HR about the timing of when they want that stack of forms is an important piece of the pie. And this is all assuming your application was filled out correctly. So there have been situations where just funny things happen. So you want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in the right spots when you're actually going through the formal retirement process in terms of submitting paperwork. and information that everybody needs to get things processed in a timely manner. So we thought it'd be a good idea to just give you a snapshot of some of the main pieces of the pie in terms of submitting paperwork for formal retirement. So if you're a FERS retiree, the base retirement application is what they call SF 3107. So this is a snapshot of the first page of retirement paperwork for FERS employees or FERS transfer employees. The important one with this is a lot of identifying information about you and your time with the government, but the main piece of the pie with this stack of paperwork is getting a handle on the surviving spouse benefits that you hypothetically choose, in addition to a few other pieces of the pie, which we'll get to here in a second. So this is a snapshot of the main stack for FERS retirement paperwork. So if you're a CSRS employee, this would be SF 2801 is the SF form that you submit for CSRS and CSRS offset retirement. So, all righty, items to include with that SF 3107 would be if you're in a spot where you're taking a survivor benefit and you opt for anything less than the maximum, which is 50%, then there's a page that your spouse signs that they're acknowledging that they know that that's taking place, and that page also has to be notarized. If you're a person that has a divorce decree or a court order available for processing, which entitles a former spouse to a portion of your pension payment, that is one you definitely want to get ironed out well in advance of formal retirement, because there's a lot of work that takes place in terms of feeding that information to Uncle Sam. So, and then copy of your marriage certificate is always one that you have to include in the stack. Receipt for any buyback time. If they've already packaged that into your service computation date, that's fantastic. But if you have the receipt for the buyback, and like we were saying, DD 214, it just lessens the margin for error that can take place when OPM's digesting all the information that you're sending to them. And then a void check for direct deposit on those pension payments is a piece of the pie as well. FEGLI, the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, is a separate form, but if you're carrying FEGLI into retirement, there's some decisions that you need to make. So let's just say you're at the point of retirement, you had the full boat of FEGLI. You'd have to make a decision on which options you'd want to keep as a retiree and whether or not you want to keep all of it, half of it, or a quarter of it. So if you got basic, option A, option B, and option C, you definitely want to have a handle on the pricing of how that changes from the price they charge you as an active employee to what they charge you as a retiree. And it can be a little bit of a sticker shock. But generally with the group life insurance plan, the more and more years of service you get under your belt, the price tends to go up noticeably. So, but FEGLI isn't all that bad. I would say 9 times out of 10 people opt to hang on to basic, which is essentially your salary plus $2,000 extra dollars, and option A, which is a flat $10,000 if you have option A. So basic and option A, and people usually opt for what's called a 75% reduction. It's just the easiest way to keep the price the same as what you were paying as a full-time employee, and not go from a relatively easy premium to $200 or $300 or $400 a month. So definitely knowing the cards that you're working with FEGLI coverage, and the difference between the pricing for FEGLI as an active employee versus pricing as a retiree. So pricing as a retiree goes up quite a bit, but that's usually tied to whether or not you got like a couple multiples of salary. Option C, the family coverage, is pretty cheap while you're working, but when you switch to being a retiree, they charge you quite a bit more for that option C coverage. So FEGLI choices are always one of the main pieces of the pie in terms of decisions that need to be made as a retiree. So in addition to pension, FEGLI, there's also some tax withholding forms that you need to be aware of too. So the IRS W-4P, that would be for federal tax withholding on your pension payments. And then if you're in a state that charges state income tax on retirees, you can also opt to add what's called a W-4P for each individual state. So like here in Kansas City, Missouri, depending on your adjusted gross income, Typically, if you're a Missouri resident, you got to pay state income tax on your first pension benefits. But in Kansas, they don't charge state income tax on federal retirement. So just the difference between one state versus the other can have a big impact on taxation on a state by state basis. And each state is just a little different. So depending on where you are, you want to know the taxation for certain benefits as a retiree. And it's, like I said, it's different for each state that you're in. So this is just a snapshot of IRS W-4P. So typically, most of the time, people will gravitate towards setting it the same way as they had their tax withholding when they were working full time. But this one isn't etched in stone. You can adjust it going forward as a retiree. But when you're submitting the paperwork to HR and OPM, they'll definitely want to have an idea of what you want to do for tax withholding on a federal basis with the pension payments. So then this is just a snapshot of a state tax withholding form. So this is Missouri's state tax withholding. You want to know the rate that the state is charging for taxes on retirees, and then fill this form out accordingly. So all right, moving on to beneficiaries. So it's always good to know the important beneficiary forms that you're working with while you're still an active employee. So we always try to emphasize to folks, if you haven't looked at these in a while and you need to make some updates, it's best to do them all at the same time, so nothing slips through the cracks. So SF 1152 would be unpaid compensation of a deceased employee. That'd be your final paycheck and your leave payment. SF 2823 would be a beneficiary designation for federal employees group life insurance, the FEGLI coverage. SF 2808 is a beneficiary designation for CSRS retirement contributions. SF 3102 would be the FERS equivalent of beneficiary designation for FERS retirement system contributions. So if you and your spouse, God forbid, are killed in a car wreck, hypothetically, and you don't have any children to leave that chunk of money to, or let's say God forbid, you and your spouse are killed in a car wreck and there's a surviving spouse on your first pension anymore, then there's going to be a return of the money that you paid in for into the FERS pension coffers or CSRS pension coffers. So it's not a beneficiary designation that comes up in conversation quite a bit. You might have filled it out, new employee orientation, but it's definitely a chunk of money that would be payable to somebody based off of certain circumstances. So might be worthwhile to double check those beneficiary designations and just make sure they're set the way that you want it to be set. And then TSP, they've updated things within the last couple of years, so you can update your beneficiary designation for TSP directly through their website. So, and we'll give you an idea of what all these forms look like here in a second. So moving to a snapshot of what SF 1152 looks like. So like I said a second ago, this would be if you passed away prior to getting to formal retirement as an active employee, this would be a beneficiary designation for that final paycheck and annual leave payment. SF 2823, that's like we said a second ago too, the FEGLI beneficiary designation. This form you want to read closely because it's kind of tricky in terms of the wording. You have to have a few witnesses and you have to make sure you fill out primary and contingent beneficiaries correctly. So if you got any questions on this, you can always send them our way and we'll give you some insight on the situations that we've dealt with in terms of getting this form filled out the right way. SF 2808 would be the CSRS pension contributions. And then SF 3102 would be the pension contributions for the FERS retirement system. So, and then this is just a snapshot of the page on TSP's website that you go to update your beneficiary information directly through the TSP website now. So you used to fill out a separate form, but within the last couple of years, they changed it to doing it on their website. So moving on to wills and trusts. So in a general sense, a trust gives you control on how assets are distributed after you're gone. So a living trust, you can revoke it or amend it whenever needed, which is an important variable to take into consideration because oftentimes trusts need to be adjusted based off of life happening. So, but some of the key highlights of whether or not you need a trust. Trust allows you to avoid probate. It maintains privacy. And the other variable, too, is it gives you the ability to establish directives if you're incapacitated before you get to that point. So, medical, financial directives have been a piece of the pie for a long time with the trust conversation. But as of late, they've added digital property directives. And one of the newest ones would be a dementia directive, too. But we also have an estate planning attorney in our office who worked for a long time as a CSRS employee for the Department of Justice. So this is just a snapshot of Linda's contact information. Of benefits. All right. So when you actually fill out all the retirement paperwork and get to the point of submitting it, you submit it to HR, and then your agency processes it first. And then once they've gotten through their pieces of the pie, that's when they forward everything to the Office of Personnel Management. So once and your leave payment actually gets paid by your agency. So final paycheck and annual leave are the first payments that come to you after formal retirement. Once those deposits have taken place, that's when you know that HR has moved the stack to the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM. So when you move from HR processing it to sending everything to OPM, you'll get NFC notice of separation. So it's usually sent within a month or two after the point of retirement. And it's just giving you a heads up that your agency has gotten through their piece of things and moved the stack on to OPM. And then once OPM gets it and starts processing things on their end, they'll eventually send you what's called a CSA number. And CSA number stands for Civil Service Annuitant Number, and it's essentially your identification number as a retiree with the federal government. So CSA number is a very important piece of information to hang on to and know as a retiree. After they send the CSA number to you, they'll mail you a temporary password about a week or so after the welcome packet comes from OPM. And you want to keep an eye out for that temporary password, because if you don't open it up and log into their services online website in a timely manner, then the temporary password expires and you got to request another one, which takes 5 to 10 business days, hopefully, to get to you. So just remember, once you get the welcome packet from OPM, keep an eye out a few days after that for that temporary password, which allows you to log into their services online website and get an idea of where things are at in the pipeline. So when you have the ability to log into services online, you can get a statement on interim pension payments. They'll give you a notification once they've moved your retirement paperwork to a case manager. So they don't update it like every day, but periodically it's kind of like the main source of information to get a status updates on where things are at in process. And then once you're on the books as a retiree, that's when you can make a decision on what you want to do with TSP money. So it's usually a couple weeks after the formal retirement date. So this is just a snapshot of what your CSA number will look. They actually send you it's like a little credit card shape, and it'll look exactly like this and have your individual CSA number on it. So all right. So once you actually start getting paid from OPM, you're not going to get your full pension payment right away. There's a period of time. It usually takes on the quick end about 3 months where you're getting partial pension payments. And what's going on is OPM is essentially auditing your service history and crunching the numbers to get the final payment amounts for everything on their end. So when you're in that interim status, that's when you'll be getting, sometimes it's usually anywhere from 60 to 80% of what your full final pension payment is supposed to be. But that one's always a little bit of a crapshoot. You don't know whether or not it's going to be 50%, 70%, 80%. So just knowing that you're going to be in limbo land for a couple months when you formally retire is important, so you don't have any sort of gap in income there. So, and then that interim payment doesn't necessarily include the first supplemental payment, so that's just on the pension piece of things. And then your full finalized official pension payment usually comes 60 to 90 plus days after the point of formally retiring. But The bullet point at the bottom is an important one. It really hinges on how complex your first service history is. So if you've had a few breaks in service, chunks of time that you're making deposits for, then it's important to know that it might take a little bit longer than the standard default in terms of timing of getting your full pension payment from OPM. So we've had a few clients who've had some unique situations that caused OPM to take an extended period of time to crunch the numbers on their final full pension payment. So if you're in that boat, there's things that you can do to speed the process along, but hopefully the idea would be that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's and provide all the identifying information needed so everything runs as smoothly as possible. So what happens with federal health benefits, dental and vision? So FEHB is transferred to OPM after retirement. When you're on interim pay, they're not taking your FEHB premiums, but they'll retroactively deduct it once the final numbers are crunched. So just know that's a piece of the pie they're kind of escrowing in the background. So it's not like you don't have FEHB coverage. It's just it's one of those things where it's kind of in flux for a couple months after you formally retire. But they'll eventually finalize your pension payment and they'll pay you the money that you're owed, but they'll also deduct the FEHB premiums that you were supposed to be paying as well. So. And dental and vision is kind of a separate thing from FEHB. So you communicate directly with benefits for continuing dental and vision as a retiree. And at the bottom there is the contact information for benefits. So general roadmap, OPM takes their time. Hopefully it's sooner as opposed to later, but it's, like I said, it's always a little bit of a crapshoot on how long that takes. They take their time to verify all your records, your service history, and then they crunch the numbers for that final official FERS pension payment. They also pay you the money that you were owed in that interim period, but at the same time, they'll deduct the FEHB premiums that were due and any FEGLI premiums that were due at the same time. So you definitely want to know what's coming down the pipe with that. Oftentimes people are wondering whether or not they're out the money when they're in that interim pay status, and that's not the case. You get all the money that you're supposed to be paid. It's just you'll get interim pension payments for a couple months, and then they'll true everything up on the back end. So there'll be interim pension payments for a couple months, and then this chunk of change that comes after everything's finalized. And then this is just a snapshot. Once they've crunched the numbers for your official payment amount, they'll detail all the pieces of your retirement benefits in a little book that's called My Federal Retirement Benefits Book. It's got that blue cover, and this is what the front page of it looks like. But that'll break down the choices that you made on first pension, the options that you chose for surviving spouse benefits, the options that you chose for federal employee group life insurance. It'll detail the first supplemental payment amount. So how do you get started? That's a question that is marinating in the back of a lot of folks' minds. So when we're working with people, it's usually a multi-step process. First meeting is what we call a fact-finding meeting, where we send you a list of identifying information to gather, and we just get an idea of your unique service history, what your plans are for the timing of retirement, and the more accurate the information is that we get from you, the more accurate we can be with the numbers that we crunch for you. So first meeting is fact finder. Second meeting, we put all that information together in a written plan for you, which details your choices on first pension. It'll give you a pretty close idea of what that pension amount is going to be. It'll give you options for surviving spouse benefits. We give you a breakdown of the federal employee group life insurance choices, and what the pricing looks like for whether or not you hang on to everything you have or opt to hang on to basic and option A with a 75% reduction. We give you an idea of what the first supplemental payment is going to be in terms of the amount, and then distribution options for thrift savings plan. So those are the formal pieces of FERS retirement. But in addition to that, we always like to run what's called a net monthly income comparison, because sometimes when people look at those estimates, they'll be comparing their gross their gross income while they're actively employed to just that pension number. But really, you gotta take a look at, well, what's my gross monthly income looking like while I'm actively employed relative to the three main pieces of the pie, which would be pension, first supplement, or Social Security, and then any money that you'd have spinning off of thrift savings plan. And then once you get a handle on that number, it's always important to keep in mind that there's a lot of deductions that you pay for as an active employee that go away at the point of retirement. So that's why oftentimes the net monthly income is closer than people think it is, because there are a lot of deductions that you pay for as an active employee that go away at the point of retirement. So it makes a big impact when you're not paying TSP contributions, Social Security tax, Medicare tax. So and then we'll give you a breakdown of investment and income strategy for what to do with TSP money. Because like we said on the early part of the call, you've been saving all this TSP money, you've been save mode. Eventually, you want to dial into a distribution strategy. And oftentimes for folks, people want an amount of monthly income spinning off of the TSP money they saved and the rest to be invested in growing. But earmarked for kind of like emergency or opportunity bucket, which usually boils down to a house, car, medical, vacation fund. So, and then in subsequent meetings, we review the options for what you do with the FERS pieces of the pie, and help you make decisions on which options that you want to go with for pension, for FEGLI, and then TSP. We finalize the investment strategy and income strategy. And in addition to that, that oftentimes includes opening up traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs, or incorporating any after-tax investment accounts that you have. And then it's an ongoing process with folks that are clients of ours. So life happens, and sometimes the plan needs to be adjusted after the point of formally retiring from the government. So it's not like our relationship with clients doesn't end at the point of retirement. It's an ongoing relationship, even moving forward past formal FERS retirement. So what are the items of identifying information that you would want to gather for a fact-finding meeting? So copy of just a recent pay stub or leave and earnings statement is an important piece of the pie. Any sort of retirement estimate that you can get your hands on is always helpful. Then a copy of a recent TSP statement. Any other investment accounts, so like old 401ks, outside IRAs, after-tax brokerage accounts that you'd like to have incorporated into the plan are important to know. And then detail on any sort of outside life insurance policies that you accumulated along the way. So whole life, term life, any long-term care policies, things like that. In addition to those pieces of the pie, it's always good to have an idea of what the numbers look like for Social Security. So just getting your hands on a copy of an up-to-date Social Security statement is important. Divorce decree, if that's applicable for your situation. And then sometimes people want to add spouse's benefits into the overall plan. So we always encourage people to think about that piece of the pie as well, whether or not they have a spouse that's got retirement pension benefits or 401k benefits that they want to incorporate into a total plan. So how about any questions, Patty?
We don't have any questions right now, but if you have some, just feel free to type in the chat box or unmute and ask. We do appreciate you joining us. For those of you that are new, we do this once a month, typically the third Thursday. Also, David and Gary are available to do in-person seminars at your agency. For more information, you can go to our website, bfgkc.com, click on services, and then seminars. And it looks like we do have some questions.
Sure.
One is, how much do your services cost?
We don't charge anybody a fee to put the plan together. So if it makes sense for you to take a look at investment and income strategies with TSP money, or look outside for outside life insurance, if that's a piece of the pie that makes sense for your individual situation, those are typically that's how we get paid. But in terms of putting a version 1 plan together for you, we don't charge a fee for that.
Then there's another question. I'm a probation officer and believe I would be eligible for the GAP SS payment. What does that look like or entail?
The gap SS payment, off the top of my head, I'm thinking that probably refers to the first supplement, the gap Social Security payment. So the first supplement is designed. So sometimes certain employees have mandatory retirement dates, or the first supplement is kind of like this benefit that Uncle Sam pays you because you have the years of service in to retire from the federal government, but you're not eligible for Social Security yet, which you're eligible to first start Social Security at age 62. So if you can retire without any sort of reduction in benefits prior to the eligibility for Social Security, that's when that first supplement payment gets paid to you. So if you're a law enforcement officer and you have a mandatory retirement date of 57, hypothetically, then from 57 to 62, that's when you're going to get that gap Social Security payment, or what they call the first supplemental payment. It kind of mirrors Social Security, and logistically it operates pretty similar to Social Security. It's just technically paid by the Office of Personnel Management, and then it automatically stops once you turn 62, because that's when you're first eligible to turn on Social Security. Any other questions, Patty?
Doesn't look like it.
Well, thanks again for tuning in, everybody. And if you think of something that we didn't touch on in the call, or you just have any questions in general, you can always give me a call, send me an email, or just submit the question on our website. So again, thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you guys in the future.